Oh, I am so glad to be with you, and I'm so glad to be seated right beside virtually my dear friend, Crystal Sanford Brown, because we are, OMG, this is the two of us, two badass trauma survivors, walking each other home, walking each other home. And today, we're going to talk about what is this thing called entitlement? Entitlement. And how does it affect us as trauma survivors? Are we entitled, or is it always everybody else that's entitled? I'm not talking about me as a victim. I'm talking about people abusing power. That's what I'm talking about. And I want to hear from Crystal because I know, as Crystal usually does, she researches this stuff. So, Crystal, when you were researching entitlement, honey, what touched you about what you read?
Ooh, I read a lot,
I bet.
and I wanted to make sure that as I was reading, did I see myself in there? In the sense,
Good point.
insider and outsider. Have
Mm-hmm.
I ever looked at individuals and felt like I deserve something from them, or were they looking for something from me in a way that wasn't respectful?
I love that. I love that because what you're getting at is entitlement and narcissism both assume that somebody's got the power and somebody
Mhm.
doesn't have the power, and that there's a rightness to that. There's a rightness to that. When I was looking at this from a legal standpoint, what I came to, Crystal, is really similar. It's that some people have the right and other people at best have a privilege. And a privilege
Mhm.
is nothing enforceable. A right is, I have the right to do
Mhm.
this. I want to give you an example, and I invite you to give us an example. When I was in 1973, I
Mhm.
am in law school, and it's the first year that any significant number of women go to law school. And so we don't have a right to be there. We have a privilege. And what's the privilege dependent upon? It's dependent upon and I later sat on one, the admissions committee at law schools. And so that September, 1973 was hard because there were a number of men in my class, Crystal, they did not want to see us. They did not want to hear us.
Mhm.
They had the right, they felt they had the right to say things to us like, it's okay. Literally, I had a man say to me, it's okay, you're here. That means that I'll have less competition getting a job when we graduate. And he said it with a smile. That was entitlement. And so we raised it. I mean, I was one of the people, I was an outspoken person, and I raised it with the
I
faculty.
can
And I said,
imagine.
what a surprise. I raised it with the faculty and I said, look, this is not conducive to learning. If 30% of the class, I mean, it was like over 50%, it was like, what was it? 80% were men, but a good
Mhm.
30% of them were saying, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? And so I raised it. And one of the professors stood up in front of, and I like this guy. And he opened his mouth, and Crystal and everybody, here's what he said. He said, all right, I understand that a number of men in this class are being pretty aggressive with the women and telling them they don't belong here. I
Mhm.
want to assure you, now here we go. Ready? Are you ready? Here's what he said. I assure you that the women in this class have LSAT law school admission test scores that are X number of points higher than the men. And not only,
What?
yeah, get going, get going. Then the next thing was not only that, their GPAs are point da 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 higher than the men. So if you think that it was easy for women to get in here, no, it was hard. And
Yeah.
my first response was, wow, he told them. And my instantaneous second response was, here is a law professor saying entitlement is acceptable. It's acceptable. And from that point,
Mhm.
that was the first week of law school. I didn't feel it. I didn't feel at home there anyway, but I feel at home there. And it's no accident
Mhm.
that my two classmates of color in a class of 80 people,
Mhm.
they both got bounced out. Mm-hmm. They both got bounced out, and I formed a study group with them because I thought we can learn from each other. These people were teaching me, I was learning from them, but they did not have the privilege. When you looked at all of the attorneys, Thurgood Marshall was rare. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, first in her class, could not get a job. Couldn't get a job. So, what is this thing about entitlement, Crystal? I think you're right on to it. And I'd like to hear your experience. That's just one of mine. But the deal is, people with power feel they have the right to hold on to power, and it is with their largesse that they prop up one of us to say, well, here's a Black person that happens to just have made it into the corporation. And we'll put that person right on the front page so everybody can see. Yeah. What's your experience of your ample experience with this? What's one example you've had with entitlement?
I believe it's not, I would say over 90 years. I am still the only person of color to hold the elected position as the president for the Michigan's National Association for Educating Young Children, NAEYC. And I have had individuals ask me, what could you have done to be the president, to hold the president's position? Now, again, it's elected. People had to vote for me. The voting ballots at that time, it wasn't electronic. You had to send them in. So people had to vote for me. They had to be counted. And there were even speculations that I must have done something in some egregious way, like slept with the CEO to get in that position, as if I did not meet the criteria listed for president.
Well, Crystal, let's face the truth here. There are no Black people. You're the only Black person in the state of Michigan, right? So it's all these other people. So you were just, of course, it's unusual if you're the one Black person in Michigan. What's going on with that?
I have no idea. And we have so many people who could be eligible for that role and additional roles. But for someone to think, and I have even had people of color to ask me, how'd you do that? Initially, I thought, seriously? I don't expect that from you. But if they don't see themselves in such a role, how could they see me?
And what is it over the centuries that has said to us, you don't belong in that role? You do not belong in that role. When you think of presidents of the United States, how many people of color had we had as presidents? You not named it, just name it, everybody. One. And the whole time he was president, I was scared to death someone was going to shoot him or shoot his beautiful family. Scared to death. And how many women, are you ready for that? How many women in the United States of America have we had as presidents? As presidents. So when you talk about entitlement, you don't have to say it out loud. You just have to see it. You just have to see it. And Crystal, what on earth does this have to do with being trauma survivors? What do you think? What do you feel?
It hurts.
Yes, it does, honey. Say more.
It hurts to the core for me that I feel as if almost like when I'm in a store and I'm shopping, minding my own business. And I
Wait a minute, girl, wait a minute. You cannot mind your own business if the store is for white people. If that's the assumption, honey, that the store is for white people, you can't mind your own business. You are there by privilege. You are
yeah,
not there. So,
I
but then
will.
you are. Okay, you're in a store. You have the right to be in a store. You're a customer. And what happens?
And if I happen to look through my peripheral vision, because again, I'm minding my own business. I'm shopping. I'm concentrating. And as trauma survivors, ADA, all kinds of stuff. And it takes a lot for us to concentrate.
Yes.
And then I'll look and I'll see someone staring at me as if I am going to steal something. I have God has been so good to me. I would never devalue his blessings. I don't want anything that belongs to someone else, and that includes a man or a woman. Not that I go both ways, no judgment, but understandably, you don't have to do that. Give me that respect.
But girl, there it is. There it is. You have the right to shop. It's your money. It's your choice making. You're supporting the economy. But look at this. If I believe, and I was just watching this video from how many years ago when little
Mm,
Ruby went to school, and the governor of the state where she was being the first Black kid in school going to the basement. They wouldn't let her into the classrooms. The governor of the state is saying segregation today, segregation yesterday, and segregation forever. And so if the assumption is that some people have rights and others don't,
mm-hmm.
then what I'm saying is when I was in law school and people were saying, "What are you doing here? You're not going to get a job. Who is going to want to hire you?" And then I thought, bull. But then I looked at the brilliance of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, first in her class. I was not first in my class, first in class. No one hired her. What happened? What did that woman do? Rutgers University hired her to be a professor. And from that platform, she incrementally assured that privilege became a right. What
Yes.
a brilliant woman. And look at what Thurgood Marshall did. And I don't want to get off on the law here, except that
Oh no, no.
I think what we're doing, girlfriend, is we're saying without our challenging entitlement, it's always going to be there. People are going to
Yeah.
look at you and say, "You don't belong here. You don't
Mm-hmm.
belong here." Um, I remember reading in Ms. Magazine, and this was like 60 years ago when Ms. Magazine came out, maybe 50 years ago. A man, his first sentence in his article in Ms. Magazine was, "When I walk into a gathering, I feel superior to at least 50% of the people in the room."
Mm.
And that's entitlement. I remember not long after that, I had a year I was at the University of Maine as an associate professor and dean, and I had a year in England, and I was
Mm-hmm.
teaching at universities there. And I was at a gathering of faculty, and one of the faculty from University of Southampton said to me, "And what is it that you do back in the United States?" And I said, "Well, I'm the dean of faculty, and I'm associate professor at the University of Maine, Augusta." The man looked at me, Crystal, like I was crazy. And he walked away. He walked away. Why? First off, I was stunned. And then I thought, wait a minute. he's in a place where there are not many women, if any, who are in the position of dean. And you don't become a professor unless you have been through Oxford and Oxbridge and Cambridge and all that
Mhm.
stuff. And I
Mhm.
thought, wait a minute, this is my truth. And there it is, Crystal. This freaks me out too. A person entitled can say, you have no rights. In fact, you don't exist. You don't exist. And that's what breaks my heart. What does that say to you, Crystal, when you think of that as you don't exist?
Well, someone asked me, and I want to say it was less than 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Again, only person of color in this advocacy meeting. How, how do you feel? Now, we're talking about some heavy stuff. We're talking about the funding and what could we do, speaking with the governor, advocating for higher salaries for early childhood educators, and so many things. Again, less than 10 years ago.
Yep.
We had a break. I'm going to get some coffee. She's following. I'm thinking, okay, she wants coffee too. But she said, can I ask you a question? And I'm thinking maybe she's going to ask me something. Maybe, did they have a certain flavoring of cream? I don't know. Her question was, how do you feel being the only Black person here? So I said to her, well, understandably, that is not my goal. The goal here is to do the work I came for, but do understand whenever I walk in a room, I look to see who else should be here.
And that woman could have said, I look to see to whom can I be an ally?
Mm-hmm.
Don't make the person feel weird or make it about you, but to whom can I be an ally? It's like there's wisdom in preschool teachers. And there's a woman named Ruth Ann Ball who came from a one-room schoolhouse in Oklahoma. And what did she do? She had a little guy coming into her class who had spina bifida and used crutches.
Mm-hmm.
He knew that the other children would look at him askance because we look at differences askance. Don't tell me that children don't have bias. They do. They do.
At an early age, too.
At a very early age, infants. Okay, so she knew. This teacher knew that when this guy came in and he was on crutches, that the kids would be saying, "What's wrong? What's wrong with him? Not what's right with him," which is the question that Walt Whitman has encouraged us to ask.
Yes.
Be curious, not judgmental.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, what did this woman do in her wisdom as an early childhood teacher? She went to the shop teacher. Back in the day, there used to be shop classes for men, and they did things with wood. And she went to her buddy, the shop teacher, and she said, I've got little guy coming into my class, and he's on crutches. And I want him to feel welcome. Could you make crutches for every other member of that class?
Wow.
So when Joshua comes in, he can be the expert. And I thought, it's this woman. How brilliant
Mm-hmm.
is that he is entitled, just like everybody else. It's not a privilege that he's there. He's entitled. And not only that, let's use his difference as a strength. Imagine if we did that. And now let's look, Crystal, you go ahead. You got something else you want to say? And I want to turn this into what the hell is going on with trauma survivors and entitlement.
I'm looking at inclusivity
Okay.
instead of exclusion. And I like the idea of what we're doing now for children who may need adaptive measures. We don't exclude them and take them to some other back room. We include. You make adaptations so they can be inclusive inside the classroom instead of excluding them.
And
And now I understand that some children may need more adaptive measures because I believe all children are educable depending on what degree. And I don't believe in zero. All children are educable. But when we denounce and put them in some back room where they're excluded from all other school activities, how are you including them?
So my aunt, who was, they used to use the R word in those days.
Yeah, yeah.
My aunt was R, and she got sent off to this place. Oh my goodness. Like my grandmother who was determined to be insane, got sent to Gowanda, an insane asylum in New York State. My aunt got institutionalized in a place for people who were developmentally delayed. They didn't even have that term then. And they just got shut off. They got shut off. And let's look at the same thing happened to this beautiful child, Ruby, who
I
got
want you to bring that back up.
honey, because she walked in the school, this beautiful little girl. The minute she leaves her mama, gets out of the car, her mama starts praying, and her mama prays all day long with good reason, because people are saying, we're going to kill you. We're going to shoot you. We're going to kill you. We're going to, you don't belong here. And the governor of the state is saying, that's right. She gets marched in. She can hear other children laughing. She can hear other children playing. She gets taken to the basement, the dark basement. And there's nobody else there. And one day she wants to go to the cafeteria. She wants to eat with the other kids. She walks in. No one's there. It appears she's going to have no teacher until this teacher, do you know this, Chris? I'm sure you do. This teacher gets brought in. OMG. This teacher sees the beauty in this little girl. And they become lifelong friends, because the teacher's doing what teachers need to do, which is to look for the gift in every child. And you have to look far with Ruby. She's gifted. Then, just found this out last night. There were other kids that wanted to be with Ruby. They wanted to be with her. And the school would not allow it.
Yeah.
Would not allow it. And so they had to go through all of this mess before they could finally spend the afternoon to be a classmate to this little girl who had every right to be in school. That's a right, the right to education, and it's being denied. And that's our history in this country. The Supreme Court of the United States said, late 19th century, said women can't be attorneys. There's a case about this. Women can't be attorneys because our brains are too small and we can only deal with details. That's why we're suited for the House. My law school classmates and I did a reading of that case out loud. Yeah, we did a reading of that because there it was. And then in 1929, the Supreme Court of the United States, under the main opinion of Oliver Wendell Holmes, said about people who were otherwise able in terms of their mental capacity, the Supreme Court said, of course we can sterilize people that are ready for this, the word they used was imbeciles, feeble-minded. And the Supreme Court case said 3 generations of imbeciles is enough. Now, what the hell is going on in the minds of somebody who says I'm superior because I'm not otherwise able. And that's still going on every
Yeah.
day, every day. I mean, I watched a candidate for president of the United States mocking a
I
person
mean, like
who was,
walking behind her in such a creepy way, and nobody said,
nobody stopped the
stop.
stalking. And also, the same situation was when there was a gathering with press. And there was a member of the press who was otherwise able. When I'm saying that, I'm talking about somebody who has a disability in some terms, okay? And he
Mm-hmm.
had, I think, maybe spina bifida. And the candidate for the president of the United States of America mocked him. I want to say in that moment, my heart shut down. I cannot accept this entitlement to make fun of somebody who's different. Don't you dare
No.
do that. Don't you dare do that. Crystal,
Yeah. And
you've seen this over and over again.
yeah. And, things that you are speaking of and highlighting, we're not talking 200 years ago, 100 years ago. We're talking 60 and less.
We're talking
Yeah,
today.
yes.
Talking
And
today.
so how I look at myself and how I see that I have the entitlement to speak out, and break the silence. I look at what I love. What I love is education. And I believe knowledge has a lot of power. And I want to say hi to our friend Rose.
Hey,
It's
Rosie
Rosie.
from the RGV, Rio Grande Valley. So glad you're here, sweetie. And if you got Crystal's right. You got any questions you want to write in or talk to us, girl, we're going to pick it
Yeah.
up.
But you can put it in the chat or you can ask to come on. We'll bring you on. But what I look at and how my seeds have been planted and how they bloom, my last name is Brown, well, double Brown. I'm married to Browns, but that's another show. Uh,
Yes, it
and
is.
um, so when we look at Brown versus Board of Education, it
Mm-hmm.
happened. It happened when May 17th. Uh-oh. I want to get the exact year. May
Hey, Dr.
17th.
Sabrina, welcome, honey.
Hi.
Hey.
May 17th, 1954.
54.
My
Mm-hmm.
birthday is May 17th. Okay, remember Brown is the last name. I love education. My birthday is May 17th. And I haven't given up that fight. It's not that I feel that I don't have to adhere to boundaries and regulations, but when people want to tell me what I should not have because they feel they're entitled and I shouldn't be entitled, you're going to get a fight.
Girl,
You're
and
going
here's
to
what this, I hear you. And this program is all about the fight that we've got as two badass trauma survivors walking each other home. Why? Because let's face it, to be Black is to be traumatized. To be
Mm.
otherwise able is to be traumatized, and to be raised by a narcissist or an abusive person is to be traumatized. One of the traumatizations in my case was that if I spoke up and spoke out,
Hmm.
I would be out, knocked out. And I didn't know as a little kid, was I dead or not? I mean, when my father punched me, threw me into a wall, that was the consequence of having a voice. I didn't know if I was going to exist. It takes, even today at age 77, such courage to believe in my own voice that I can speak up and speak out, that I get it why so many people are terrified that if they speak up and speak out, they will be annihilated.
Yeah.
Annihilated. And here's another example of that, talking about trauma survivors. And Crystal, you were talking about this in terms of just today, just last week, people talking with you about who are you? Who were you? So here's what my father taught me as a woman. Then my father had 3 daughters, and he was a misogynist, and he was privileged, and he was from a culture of privilege where men had the right to initiate their daughters sexually. This was part of the culture. My father would say to me, if he didn't like something that I said, which was all the time, he would say, "You didn't see that, daughter." Now, what entitlement is that for a father to tell his daughter, "I define reality. The way you see and experience the world is not real"? But isn't that what all of entitlement is about, Crystal? For you to be your own self. Your own family says to you, "You're going to lose your black card, girl."
All the time. Dr. Sabrina, can I? Oh, let me introduce you. Dr.
Yeah.
Sabrina is a very close friend of mine, and she does. Can I introduce you, or would you like to introduce yourself?
Knock yourself out. Go ahead, girl.
So, and also, hello to Rosie. If you want to visualize
Yeah.
yourself, honey, we're glad to see you from the Rio Grande Valley. Rosie Alatorre, thank you for joining us. Yeah, so
And
introduce Dr. Sabrina. By the way, I do want to say, sweetie, I'm going to just interrupt here because Rosie put something in the chat that was powerful.
I saw that.
She said, in our schools in Texas, we're talking Texas, in our schools within Texas, children get the services they need in the inclusive classroom. Now that matters. That matters. My son, who is otherwise able, yay, there's Rosie. Rosie, is that the case? That is the case in Texas of a child? Yeah. Can you say just a little something about that? And then we're going to get back to Dr. Sabrina.
Sorry, I was in and out of the of my desk, but yes, so it's always been a part of the Texas minimum standards, but up until recently, daycares have started to get citations for not allowing therapy services to go into the daycare centers and do any kind of rehab, physical, speech, or whatever. So now if they don't let them in, they're being reported to the state and they're getting investigations. So now they're getting in trouble technically for not letting those therapists and into the classroom environment.
Why, Rosie, thank you so much. Why would they stop? Since this has been going on for years, a child needs speech therapy, this child gets speech therapy. Why would a child care director or a family director say, "You can't have that anymore"?
Well, it's not that they wouldn't let them in, but before they used to use like an empty classroom so they could work one-on-one. But now they want to see them in the natural environment, if they're outdoors, or if they're in learning centers, or if they're doing circle time or music or uh, whatever they may be doing at that part of the day when the therapists get there. Now they want to see them with all the other children interacting and in their their natural daily environment of being inside the daycare, inside the classroom. So I think So we just had our conference last weekend. And on Friday, we invited ECI Region 1 childcare licensing regulations, I'm sorry. And we had discussions. We had breakout sessions on being inclusive and how to have those conversations with parents. And we kind of had a Q&A roundtable session where the directors were able to express their concerns over having that extra person walking into the classroom with the teacher, and the children. And there's always chaos. When somebody new goes into the classroom, the kids go wild and they want to, oh, who are you? What are you doing? And, things like that. So I think that was one of the issues I guess the directors had, because they're so focused on our Texas Rising Star Quality Program, where they have to be doing their curriculum, following their schedule, because they get scored on that. And they were afraid that if that extra person walks in from any of the therapy services that we have, and we're there and they kind of go off track, or kids are misbehaving, or they're climbing on top of, they want to see what the therapist is doing, and they're doing all these things with this one child, and they want to come over and do the same thing. So I think that was one of the biggest I guess issues that the directors had with having that therapist go into the classroom. Not that they didn't want it, but they just didn't want that interruption of my teacher's trying to do her lesson, her activity, and then here comes the therapist, so that was,
Oh, I
those have
get
been the
it.
issues
Okay.
recently.
Thank you, sweetie. So that's fixable. People who are new coming in the classroom can be introduced, the way can be paved, and that's an easy fix. Okay. I thought maybe you were talking about people not wanting to have those services anymore. Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. Woof. And Dr. Sabrina, honey, I think Crystal supposed to knock herself out and tell the truth about you, huh?
Yeah,
I want to hear this. Rosie and I want to hear.
Dr. Sabrina is from the Metro Detroit area, but she travels all over the world. And she is on every single platform imaginable. She has been very creative and has done a lot with assessment, how to get a better understanding of who you are. And she does workshops, she does radio, so much. I know I'm going to forget something. However, she's known as the people expert in the all over. And I love what she does, because she is another person that speaks up and speaks out and has broken generational curses in her family with no shame. No shame. And
Can I
has
ask Dr.
given
Sabrina?
other.
Yeah, I want to ask her a question about just what you said. Sabrina, Crystal and I have talked a lot, and Rosie, you're aware of this too, that if someone is the messenger gets shot. In other words, if someone speaks up and speaks out and says, in my family, there was physical abuse. In my family, there was incest. In my family, the man who was everybody thought was a saint was in fact a pedophile. What we've experienced with entitlement is that the family system will gather around the entitled right to continue the abuse rather than to step up and say to the one person speaking out, thank you for trying to make a difference. Thank you for saying the circle can stop here. What have you noticed about that exiling of the trauma survivor to keep the system intact? Or is that just what Crystal and I have experienced?
Oh, no, that's what everyone experiences, because the first thing is that our society re-victimizes the victim off the rip. any
Mhm.
kind of issue. So if the person says that, hey, this has happened to me, then you have to explain it a thousand times to somebody. And then the people who really were supposed to protect you and didn't, they take it personally and they feel like you are affronting them, and then they're going to attack you. And so that is just a normal thing for families when there has been trauma that has occurred. And then the other thing is that a lot of people don't feel that it's something that we need to discuss, that we need to change, because even though they were traumatized, they feel like, well, look at me today. I'm okay. I'm not thinking about it. I'm still doing fine. And they re-victimize again, the victim. And so, yeah, that is a really big thing. And so one of the things that I say, because I remember when I came out to my family and told them that I had been molested, and and when I came out, I said it on TV. I was on TV the first time I said it, and then they heard it. And so there were family members who called other family members to say, well, do you believe that? Do you believe what she's saying? Do you know that? And my uncle decided to call me and say, well, I'm calling to get to the bottom of it because I don't know if I believe it. And my response was, I don't give a flying fuck if you believe it. Because it ain't your story, it's mine.
Right.
And I have a right to my story. And if you don't support me, fine. And it's not going to make me shut up and not make me be and stand in my truth. So once you get to the point that you're able to stand in your truth, I don't care who on the planet don't like it.
And girl, you have just identified go Crystal, go Crystal. You just identified one of the issues that we're talking about, the deep issues we're facing in this particular program, which is when someone feels entitled. The person feels entitled to annihilate the person who's speaking out. Look what happened. I mean, that sad song about the strange fruit. The strange fruit on the tree. If somebody did something wasn't even true, like all the black men who were accused of having relations with white women, they were hung from trees. They didn't even have a chance. And that entitled, what was awful, and Rosie, I don't know if you experienced this, but back in the day, there used to be festivities in places like Alabama and Mississippi. People would bring fried chicken, they'd bring food to one of these hangings.
Well,
And
you know
that,
you know what it actually was called, a picnic, because
right.
what they would do was pick a nigga. That's
I
where
did
the
not know
term
that.
comes from. So I never say that I go on picnics, because I don't. I may go on a cookout, I may go on a barbecue, but I am not going on the picnic because I understand the origin of the word. And so a lot of times we are engrossed in keeping that system alive, and we don't even realize that's what we're doing.
Well, look at what now Rosie is with us, and Rosie comes from right in the area of United States, which abuts with Mexico. And back in the day, I used to go there, and I could walk across the bridge. I could go right into Mexico. I saw these people coming out with teeth that looked like chiclets. Why? Because they could get their teeth done in Mexico at a much better price. They got their medicine there. Now, and this, I'm going to say it, what happened to the children back in the day, and it was what, in the last 8 years? Children got separated from their parents. Right around with Rosie, what the people, the childcare people in your area stepped up to do everything they could to help those children feel like they were loved. Do you remember what people did and if that was effective? Because what that was happening was these children were being labeled as you don't exist.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything you remember, Rosie, that people did in the area in the area? Because I recall all kinds of people stepping in to try to connect with those babies.
So you know Lily.
Yes.
So they would join a local organization here, and they would cross over into Mexico and take all kinds of educational, personal hygiene items over across the border, actually, right to Matamoros. And they had an encampment there where all the children were, like some just kids and some with an adult with them. But they would go and give school and give classes and teach, and they had a lot of people, local businesses and just people in general that would donate all kinds of supplies to take over to them. And they would go on a weekly, every Sunday, they would go over, they would walk over the border and do these positive things for these kids as they were waiting to see, are they going to be able to cross over? Are they going to be sent back to where they were from? That was one of the big ones, like the local organizations here that got their people together, and they had people from different states that they would come just here and do whatever they could for those children.
Do you think
Yeah.
that made a difference?
Oh, absolutely. Because I mean, a
So
lot of them came, they didn't come with anything. So I know I donated, like, I think I gave Lily like $100 and she went and bought socks and deodorant and,
Mhm.
just basic necessities that we all need that they didn't come with anything.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
And I'm just feeling like what a simple, loving thing to do. Instead of to say, these people are from, and I'm not going to repeat what was said, these people are from these countries with gangs, countries with, I'm not going to repeat it. It was just disgusting. But what a simple healing thing to do.
Mm.
Dr. Sabrina, what is going on with people that instead of doing the simple healing things like what Lily does in the Rio Grande Valley, what holds people back from doing that, and what empowers them to use entitlement to literally kill people?
Mm-hmm. Well, we have to understand that your DNA has a memory. And so there's things that's passed down through our DNA that continues to permeate. So if we're honest, this country was built on violence. This country was built on tricking people, using people, killing people. And so that memory has been passed down in our DNA. And so you have a group of people that they have the entitlement in their DNA, and then you have people who have the feeling of being oppressed and fear in their DNA. And so you find that it takes something to move past what your models have been, because the number one way to teach a social or a behavioral skill is through modeling. People do what they see. And so in our country, we've seen some things.
Yes,
and so you find people that will continue to do those things because power is intoxicating. Because once you have it, you don't want to give it up. And so you have a country that is built on taking advantage, servitude, oppression. I mean, the list goes on. And then we want to say that, yeah, we're all created equal, but we haven't been treated like we were equal. And so when you don't have the example, where do you get it from?
And the irony that you're talking about here is when we look at the people who came to this country thinking entitlement, they took away from the people who were living in this country,
who were already here. Yes.
Who were here, their rights. And not only that, but look at people who came to this country. The entire state of Georgia was populated by whom? Right? It was people who were imprisoned. They wanted to get rid of them. So they sent them to Georgia. The people who populated New England were religious, people from different religious segments. The thing that I'm getting is that I hear you about the role modeling, and I hear you also about why do we feel we have to become as abusive to others as the people were abusive to us? And here's what Crystal and I talk about every week, and Rosie's been with us. What is it in us as trauma survivors where we say, no, I'm not doing that. I am not doing that. I think each one of us in this circle of four has been offered an invitation to the inner circle. And yet,
Mm-hmm.
who accepted it if it meant sacrificing our souls?
Yeah, yeah.
And
The
that's
other thing is that when we're traumatized, trauma has responses. And so some of the responses, of course, are emotional and cognitive, but behaviorally is very powerful. How do we behave once we're traumatized? Well, one of the ways we avoid. Avoidance is a big thing. We don't want to talk about it because when you talk about it, you're going to have to face the triggers that cause you pain. Who wants to walk into pain? Who wants to do that? I don't like pain. So people will avoid the thing that is necessary to get through the thing. And then
yet,
also,
sweetie, I just want to say to that, because that's powerful. That's something we talk about here a lot. The best way out is through. What I have learned as a trauma survivor is if I keep running from the fact that I am an incest survivor, that I am an abuse survivor, that my mother was mentally ill, if I run from that, I can't heal. And then the ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences studies become true. I have a sister that died much younger than I am because she could not face was what happened. So for me, turning around, you said, who wants to do this? I don't want to do it, but I'm choosing to do it. When I turn around and say, look, this is what happened, and I tell it, that's the truth that sets me free.
yes.
How on earth are we going to model that? Back to your point about modeling. I want to hear from Crystal about this, because how on earth are we going to model that when school systems are saying, we don't want your therapy stuff in here. We don't want to hear this stuff about being a pity me, get off the pity pot. We don't do this. Crystal and I, for years, would send in RFPs about trauma. And Crystal, what would happen?
We would get rejected, and we're talking about national organizations where we know a large percentage of early childhood educators, teachers, let's just say teachers, come into this field because they want to make a difference, most times by experiences they've experienced or someone they know. But yet
58%, Crystal, 58% of us were traumatized.
You want to shut us up and say, we don't want to talk about that at the conference. They want to put roses on everything. If we don't talk about what these children are dealing with, especially we're still in COVID, talking about what these kids and families have experienced, we are not dealing with what we should be dealing with. And it's out. Go ahead.
I just want to say that it's a couple of things. One, you can't heal from a thing until you're real about a thing. You got to be able to face it. You got to be able to talk about it. And this is the thing. I understand the viewpoint and the vantage point that we don't want to talk about it, because I don't want to just talk about it. I need to have some tips, tools, and techniques on how to deal with it. Because one of the things that I have, I'm the acronym queen. I love an acronym. And my acronym for HEAL is to help everyone affirm life. Because even though I've been through something, there's still something good about life. I need to focus on what I can do and not where I've been through. Because if I spend every day going, oh, I was abused. Oh, I was beat up. Oh, then that's where my focus lies. But I need to focus on where I'm going, not where I've been. I need to focus on what things bring me joy and then do those things on purpose. I need to focus on being around people who will uplift, inspire, encourage, and not those who will tear down. I say all the time, I go where I'm celebrated, not where I'm tolerated. And if I feel the sense of toleration, I get on. I don't have to be bothered with you because I choose who's in my space.
I hear you, sweetie. And what I'm hearing, and with my heart and with my soul, is that every trauma survivor, and I can only speak for myself, but every trauma survivor, when I get in touch with telling the truth, including the deep sorrow and the deep rage, I have deep rage about the entitlement that people had to do this stuff. There is something, and I believe this is spiritual. And I want to ask the rest of you guys about this. I believe there's something in our spirit that says, I am going to be free. I am going to be free from this. I am not going to be defined from the outside in. I'm going to be defined from the inside out. And when I have felt myself close to death, as many trauma survivors do, many trauma survivors commit suicide. Many trauma survivors put ourselves in situations that are totally unsafe. I mean, I used to hitchhike up and down the East Coast. I could have been murdered. And still within myself is a spirit that says, girl, I didn't put you on earth to suffer. I put you on earth to tell the truth. And as you share this with others, open the clearing in the woods for others to find their truth. I hear you.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Crystal.
Oh, I'm at this point, I'm listening. Rosie, do you have something you would like to add?
It's hard. It's hard, my friends. If something comes up, say it.
I know it's hard. And as we have many conferences to co-present, I know it's hard for my mother to hear this because she trusted the relatives that she left my siblings and I with. And so as often as I tell her, I don't blame you.
Right.
Because I know you and Dad did
The best
what
you could.
yes. But I know it hurts her heart to hear that I kept this inside of me for 53 years before I had the strength and the courage to say, no more. I want to live a life that I deserve without carrying someone else's shame. And that was hard.
So you and I chose a theme song for this program, and it's a spiritual. You might know it. It's called "Oh Freedom," and that song, "Oh Freedom," has a phrase: "Before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave." I'm not going down to that anymore. I'm not going down to that anymore. And yet, when I look back at the history over the centuries about people who've spoken out and said, you cannot abuse like this anymore.
Yeah.
They have been themselves annihilated. Martin Luther King, Gandhi, Bobby Kennedy, Joan of Arc, people over the years who said, no, we're going to put an end to this. An end gets put to them. And we've got only like a minute left here, but in this program, my question is, my friends, what can we do together? What can each one of us do as survivors or people that love survivors? What can we do to make sure that that voice is heard and no longer annihilated?
Well, for me, I think that it's so important that we really tell our stories, that we, and not just tell our stories, but tell how we got to the point that we're comfortable telling our stories, that we don't allow people's opinion about our stories to make us go back into a dark space. Because I really don't care what other people think about me at this point in my life. And I know it had to come with age and with wisdom, because at a younger age, I did not like several things about myself. I didn't like that I was dark. I didn't like that I was a chunky girl. I was a chunky monkey. I didn't think about those things. But now, oh my goodness, do I love me? I love the skin that I'm in. I love all these curves that I have. And I tell men, you can't handle all this chocolate. I'll put you in a diabetic coma. What? But it
Mhm.
took me a minute to get there. And so being able to speak my truth and do things that make me happy. I think that's the biggest thing. We have to demonstrate what it looks like on the other side of this. That I travel exclusively.
Mm-hmm.
I'm single. I date. I'm not scared of dating. I'm not scared of people. I'm not scared of men, even though I've been raped before in my life. Every man ain't trying to rape me. So I
Yes.
can't be stuck there. And I believe that because I'm walking this thing out, I am an example of what it looks like, feels like, sounds like when you're in a healed place.
And
Thank
people
you.
need to hear that. And I know we're close, but we're good. As often as Hollyelissa and I go and co-present, at the end of the presentations, just like I've witnessed for you, Dr. Sabrina, so many people will come up and just want to touch you and get what they feel is healing,
Mm-hmm.
because so many of us won't open our mouths,
Mm-hmm.
won't speak up, and go to your graves holding that. I don't want to do that. No, I am no longer going to protect the relatives who violated me. No, no more. So I will share after our guest.
No, that's beautiful. I just want to ask Rosie if there's anything she's noticed, Rosie, that you want to share, and don't feel you have to.
Yeah. No.
I just I myself have not had any kind of trauma, but I like joining into these type of meetings because I am just a natural nurturer. And it's funny, but everybody I seem to meet and know and are friends with, I always get their, I'm always a person they tell everything to. So I just like to be informed and be that listening ear and be empathetic and you know um, that's why I'm here. Not that anything that I've experienced anything myself, but I've had other loved ones, and and it's little things, big things, and I don't know. It's just something in me that everybody just tells me everything, and I'm like, okay.
And
If
those are the
you've
three
been,
things that a trauma survivor needs. The trauma
yeah,
survivor needs one, to be heard,
Hmm.
two, to be seen, and three, and this is a big thing, to be believed. And Rosie, if you're doing that for people, God bless you.
God
God bless
bless
you.
you.
So, my
yes,
friends, we need to
thank
wrap.
you.
Crystal, were you going to say something to wrap
Yes,
for us?
for
Thank you.
me, I have been, we talk about inside, outside, and even some of the people that I thought were friends who have said to me, stop talking about that. I don't want to hear that. Or, why did you let your husband beat you up? You could have done this and that. I knew that I had to create a loving village. I needed people around me who weren't continuing to violate me and engage and trigger me. I needed people around me who would lift my spirit, not stab at me. So, in saying that, I have people like Dr. Sabrina who has materials like this. My Essential Atlas of Colors. I have Hollyelissa and Happiness is running through the streets to find you.
Ooh, come on.
Translating trauma's harsh legacy into healing. So knowing and coming to that vision of what I needed has gotten me where I am now. I'm not saying I took a dry erase marker and marked away the past, because if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be where I am now. And I'm not shutting up. I'm vowing, like you, Rosie, to be there for other individuals. It's not always speaking about the negative, like Dr. Sabrina stated. How have I been able to continue living 23 years after cancer, 18 surgeries, the 19th coming up in a few weeks? But I keep moving forward. I'm grateful.
Amen.
Amen. Let us end with that. And my friends, hope to see you next Monday. Bring your true self. Bring your true self, and you'll be with two badass trauma survivors walking each
love it.
other home. And thank you, Sabrina. Thank you, Rosie. We love you. And we hope to
Thank
see
you.
everybody next week. Fare thee
Thank
well.
you. And
Bye-bye.
we will be hosting on other venues. Our marketing individuals are working on this. So we'll be able to join on Facebook and YouTube and some other platforms. Please share and like. It's recorded and it'll be on our Facebook pages. So please, if you want to share it, it's available. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, Rosie. Thank you,
Yeah.
sweetie.
Bye.
Bye bye.